Hey guys, I'm just hanging out in my yard doing a little yard work, and I wanted to make a very quick video on something that's been running around in my head. And I've been thinking about some of the distributions that were around when I started using desktop Linux that are no longer around. I guess I'm being nostalgic, and I remember some distributions that were very popular when I first started using Linux, and they're no longer around. And I think it's something you guys need to consider, is the fact that some of these Linux distributions you guys are using won't be around in 10 years. Most of you, whatever Linux distribution you're currently running, chances are it won't be around in 10 years. And I don't think enough of you guys have really considered this. I think you guys just assume these things will live forever. They won't. For example, most of you probably don't remember Mandrake. Mandrake was probably the most popular desktop Linux distribution, from the years around 2000 to 2004 or so, before Ubuntu existed. Ubuntu started in late 2004, and certainly by 2006, Ubuntu exploded in popularity and became, the most popular desktop Linux distribution. But before there was Ubuntu, there was Mandrake. Mandrake just slowly faded out of existence, right? Probably because a lot of people migrated to Ubuntu when Ubuntu came about. But even after that, Mandrake had some problems, some legal issues. They had to change the name from Mandrake to Mandriva. Mandriva slowly just faded into nothingness. It was forked a couple of different times. Magia was a fork. Open Mandriva was a fork. And nowadays it's pretty much dead. It's over. But you would never have guessed that if you were a Mandrake user back in the day, because it was so popular. You would have assumed it would have lived forever, but that's not the case. Some of the distributions I really loved when I moved to Linux on the desktop, I loved the old Crunchbang Linux distribution. It was a Debian-based distribution that used the OpenBox window manager. You guys know I love OpenBox. And they really filled a niche because they gave you a Linux desktop distribution without a full desktop environment. It came with a window manager. That was unusual even back then. And they did a really great job with OpenBox. It was very customized and it looked good. It had a bunch of custom scripts, and Crunchbang exploded in popularity. And then a few years after it started, the main dev of Crunchbang decided he didn't want to do it anymore, and that was the end of the project. Gone overnight. And it was forked a couple of different times. Bunsen Labs is a fork, Crunchbang Plus is a fork, and both of those distributions are still going, but they never became popular like Crunchbang was popular. Another Linux distribution that was around when I started Linux, desktop Linux, that I kind of missed and I thought it served a real niche was Linux Mint had a Fluxbox edition. I don't know, many of you guys probably were never aware of this, but Linux Mint actually used to put out a Fluxbox edition. There was an official flavor of Linux Mint with the Fluxbox window manager. And they only released a couple of versions of that particular version of Linux Mint before it died. I don't know why it died. Maybe whoever was maintaining it decided they no longer wanted to maintain it, but whatever the case, it served a real purpose because nobody did Ubuntu with a window manager. It was practically unheard of. Right now, if you wanted to do Ubuntu with, pick a window manager, OpenBox, Fluxbox, any of the tiling window managers, what's the best way to do that? Well, the best way to do it actually is to install Ubuntu server and then install Xorg and manually install everything. It's practically like an Arch install in that aspect. And Linux Mint made this process a lot easier because here's basically Ubuntu with Xorg already on the system and with this very tiny window manager, Fluxbox, that, hey, if you want to use Fluxbox, great. If you don't, remove Fluxbox and then install OpenBox or Awesome Window Manager, or whatever it is you wanted to use. And that served a real purpose. And I think that's a need that needed to be filled back then. I think it's a need that still needs to be filled, and I wish somebody would do it. But nobody makes a window manager only Ubuntu. They never have, and I don't know if there's some kind of barrier to entry why these distro maintainers can't make an Ubuntu based distribution that's a window manager only distribution. Maybe there is some kind of barrier to entry, but you see a million people do it with Debian, and Ubuntu is essentially Debian, so you would think somebody could do that with Ubuntu. Another thing is I'm starting to get worried that some of the distributions I like now are near death. If they're not dead right now, they're at least on life support. One of my favorite Gentoo based distributions is a distribution called Savion. I love Savion. I've covered Savion a million times on my channel because I really want to promote it. I help them out financially. I give to them, every month on Patreon. But Savion, I was on their website the other day. I was going to grab an ISO, and I noticed that the official ISOs, they haven't had an official release in well over a year. And that starts me thinking, if it's not dead, it's on life support. I'm starting to get the same feeling with Void Linux. Void Linux has become very popular because Void Linux is very unique in what it does. It's almost BSD-like, but of course it's a Linux distribution. And it's a suckless Linux distribution, very minimal, and they haven't had an official release in well over a year either because, I check Distro Watch all the time, and if Void had had a major release, I would have covered it on the channel. The last time I looked at Void was well over a year ago. And Void had some problems because they lost their main dev. He pretty much quit the project about 2 years ago. Other people have since taken it up, but, once you lose your main dev, that's not a good sign. While we're on the subject of losing your main dev, Solus was in that same boat when their main dev just quit the project, and Solus has seen some releases since then, but it's another project that I don't know how viable it is long term. Solus is interesting too in the fact that their repos are so bad. Their repos are so small. There's so much software that people are going to want that's not in their standard repositories, and the fact that they can't even get enough people to package the software people want, that's not a good sign. But I guess the point of this rant is, again, the distribution you're on, chances are it's not going to make it. It's not going to be around in 10 years. And some people have never considered that, and you should, because a lot of, especially you distro fanboys, you think your distribution is going to be around forever. It's the greatest thing. It could never die, and you're just setting yourself up for so much heartache. Ask the people that ran Mandrake and Crunchbang. Ask the people that ran Antergos. Another thing I'm starting to think about too is when I look at all the distributions on Distro Watch, we're starting to see less variety. There's a lot less diversity in distributions these days. Everything on Distro Watch, it seems, is either based on Ubuntu/Debian or it's based on Arch. That's it. Where are all the Gentoo based distributions? Where are all the RPM distributions? Where are all the Slackware based distributions? You don't see any of that stuff. And and those distributions that do kind of fit in those categories, like Savion being Gentoo based, or ZenWalk, some of the Slackware distributions, they haven't had releases in forever. Nobody's using them. You don't even hear about them. It's like they just don't exist. Even distributions like Gentoo. Gentoo is a major distribution, right? It is a major branch of the Linux family. Gentoo seems to not be as popular now as what it once was when I started in desktop Linux. People still use it. You still hear people talk about it, but it doesn't have that same kind of buzz around it that it did back in the day. And it kind of makes me sad. Again, this lack of diversity we have in our distributions. Everything should not be Debian based or Arch based. I like having a little variety. I like being able to change things up, completely change things up sometimes, and it doesn't seem like we have that kind of variety anymore. It's like everybody has kind of congregated around mainly two distributions, Debian and Arch, which are fantastic distributions, but I don't know if that's healthy for Linux in the long run. But this is just me walking around, ranting about pointless stuff here in my yard. But it's just something that was on my mind. I hope you guys found the rant interesting. Take care, guys. Peace.